So this time round I'm going to be looking at a fighting game that's Western release was exclusive to the UK, which is pretty strange, especially considering it's based on a manga/anime series, and that's Fighting Fury. I don't know an awful lot about this. What I do know is it's based on a manga called Baki the Grappler. I didn't have to Google that in between takes there. Now, I do think I've actually heard of it before, but I've never seen it and I know nothing of the story or characters. I imagine it makes a good fighting game because the name Baki the Grappler, the word grappler, kind of implies that fighting is involved, so that's a good start, I guess. It's pretty normal to see a manga or anime become a one-on-one fighting game. I suppose it makes sense. You tend to have a lot of characters and a lot of fighting in them, so... Now, like I said, my knowledge of this one is limited, so I apologise in advance if I don't get much of the story or anything like that right. I'll do a bit of research, but I'm not going to start watching through a whole series or reading it just to get up to grips with this one game, because I have a feeling, a strange little feeling, that it's not going to be that amazing. I hope it's at least good. A one-on-one fighter you can at least make fun if you haven't made it too deep. Let's take a look at the manual. I don't do this often enough. Okay, so we do have a paragraph here for the story, so hopefully this will give me a nice little introduction to the franchise in general. The Fighting Fury tournament is a mecca for disciples of the fighting arts. A secret tournament that must not become known. Well, how does it become the mecca of something if it's completely secret? Okay, so it looks fairly typical. A bunch of fighters get together and try and win a crazy tournament to prove they're the best in the world, I guess. That tends to be what this sort of thing's about. But if that's the story of Baki the Grappler anyway, I guess that's a pretty good start. And here we go, isn't this nice? We get all the characters listed here in the manual. I love that kind of stuff. It's the sort of thing I miss about having game manuals. One of the guys is called Jack Hammer. Jack Hammer's motto is, "I don't wait till tomorrow to win." What if the tournament's tomorrow? Oh, whatever. He also takes excessive amount of drugs and trains very hard. What kind of drugs? Hopefully it's just performance enhancing drugs, because that sounds really scary anyway. Look at this guy, Shinobu. Shinobu's special move is to rip out the cords, or blood vessels, lymph nodes, and nerves from his opponent's neck with his ultra-trained fingers. That sounds like something you'd see in Mortal Kombat. And just below the names, it even has a little quote from the character, I'm guessing. Like, this guy, 4,000 year history from China is the best. Okay. And Jack Hammer says, "I don't need tomorrow if I win today." But that's not his motto, it's slightly different. Professional wrestlers must be strong, especially outside the ring. I'm guessing that's supposed to be must. But that's cool, there's professional wrestling in here. I'm a big fan of professional wrestling, for better or worse. So that's definitely piqued my interest a little bit. But I'm going to sit here and read this forever at this point. Let's pop this in the PlayStation 2 and give it a play. Let's see if it's a worthy import for people outside of the UK or Japan. And oh, this is not what I wanted to see as a first impression. This cinematic is so dated looking. This game came out over here in 2003, but it looks like something from the mid-90s. Kinda reminds me of the very first Tekken game, but that looked better than this. And that was released in what, 1994, 1995? And it's a whole generation behind. There's something really unsettling about the way these guys move. Oh god, that's terrifying. Well, the menu screen looks equally dated, straight from the PlayStation 1. Now, upon first glance, it looks like there's quite a few game modes to pick from. Like, maybe there's quite a lot to do in this game, so hey, looks can be deceiving. It may look dated, but it might play pretty good. But let's go through these here, because I can tell you right off the bat, there's not nearly as much depth as it looks like there is here. Both of these modes referring to Baki moves, I don't quite understand. They don't seem to do anything special. This build-up mode thing just seems to be a list of moves for each character. I click on the characters and nothing happens. This noise repeats over and over again. And then learning Baki moves is just a one-on-one fight, except you can't select your character, you have to be this guy. You can select your opponent, so that's good, I guess. It feels like there should be a little bit more to this, but I don't get it. I can't figure out if there's something special I'm supposed to be doing. It's not practice mode because we've already got that, so what am I learning? Now, I already mentioned practice mode, and that works pretty much how you expect. And this one here is 2-player mode, so we can tick that off the list. That leaves us with just the two left. The Underground Arena and Tournament mode. Tournament mode is arcade mode, exactly as you'd expect it. The standard for pretty much every fighting game. You fight a guy, you beat him, you fight the next guy, you keep going until you fight the last guy, who's usually a boss, and then you win, and you get an ending. But the endings are really nothing to strive for, because everything in terms of a cutscene here is incredibly lazy. Between fights, you just get a little bit of dialogue between the two characters. That's it. Nothing more to it. So I played through the whole of tournament mode as this guy, who I'm pretty sure is supposed to be Antonio Inoki. There's also a guy who looks like Giant Baba in the game, so I think that's pretty cool. They're two of the most well-known and legendary figures in Japanese professional wrestling, so it's cool that they've got a little bit of representation there. But after going through all 10 or so fights, I can't remember how many there were, it wasn't a lot. This is the ending.
悪いね。ダメージも回復してないうちにさ。いや、気にせんでいいよ。観客はゼロだ。
It's pure text and one still image. Is this really the best they could do? Baki the Grappler seems to have a ton of content they can work off, and they aren't giving anything here? And I didn't even get one of the 2 unlockable characters, so God knows how you do that. It really feels like it was all for nothing, and it shouldn't feel that way, not on the PlayStation 2 for God's sake. But that leaves us with one mode left, which I'll admit I actually played Underground Arena first, but I decided to talk about Tournament mode first, and you'll see why in a second. Underground Arena is just the tournament mode, except it's all in the Underground Arena, so all in one stage, and you can't select your character. You've got to play as the same guy you play as in the Learning Baki Moves mode. That's it, I can't really tell any other difference. I'll admit I didn't bother completing the Underground Arena mode, but that's because the gameplay is really slow and tedious here. So it's a 5-button fighter. It's not quite your standard controls. You get punch, kick, super attack, and perfect guard, and then the 5th button is used to taunt. You build up this little bar under your fighter, which is pretty standard in a lot of 2D fighters especially, but I can't figure out how to use this. I've tried all of the standard button combinations for both 2D and 3D fighters, and none of them seem to do anything. From what I can tell, it's quite a limited move set for each character, and they're done with pretty simple inputs. I will say the few characters I did play do feel different, so they've got that down. They play different fighting styles, and it kind of works. And I played most of the game as a guy called Kanji, who is the guy I said looks like Antonio Inoki, and he fights like Antonio Inoki, which is pretty cool actually. But it really didn't feel like there was much strategy involved. I barely had to use this perfect guard button, which when you've dedicated a whole button that's usually used as some kind of attack button just to this, and you don't need it because the AI isn't particularly tough to fight, even on harder difficulties. They don't put up much of a fight at all. Sometimes they'll just stand there. Sometimes you end up thankful for this though, because it's really slow and delayed. That's something that's quite hard to explain when you're just watching footage, but when you're making the inputs and everything feels like you're doing it underwater, it can be a little bit frustrating. It's like nothing syncs up. It's like watching a video out of sync with the audio. It's just annoying. And the more it goes on, the more annoyed you get. You just want to fix it. Now, special moves certainly exist in the game, because I saw a bunch of characters do them on me. Like, the one moment of difficulty, I guess you could say I had in the game, the one part where they finally fought back, was when this guy one-hit KO me. Like, from full health. You have 2 health bars as well. How the hell did he do that? Another minor / major annoyance, let's say a little thing that can make a big difference, is you can't use the analog stick. It's a PS2 game that's not compatible with its own controller, lending yet more evidence that this was developed for the PlayStation 1. I'm sticking with that story. I think it's a PS1 game at heart. So I've gone through all the modes, I've played as much as I can. There's no regular 1v1 mode, you have to do it in 2-player. The closest thing you can get is this learning Baki moves mode. How strange is that? A fighting game where you can't just have a little exhibition match against the computer. I don't know, I should have known what to expect the moment I selected the character Kanji. I mean, look at this. Yep, that sums up what the game thinks of me, and that pretty much sums up what I think of the game as well. Right back at ya. Remember earlier in the video when I said this? Let's see if it's a worthy import for people outside of the UK or Japan. It's not. What we have here is something that's incredibly dated, even for the time period. For 2003, this is kind of embarrassing. Now, I have a feeling it was actually made in the year 2000, which would make a bit more sense. That would have made it a launch title for the PlayStation 2, or at least close to. And a few things I've read online imply that this was perhaps released in 2000 in Japan. I'm not 100% sure. But then made it over here in 2003. But that really begs the question, why? Outside of Japan, they decided to localize it for one country, one region, and that's here. Is there a massive following of Baki the Grappler here in the UK? There might be. Obviously they felt like there was some reason to do this, some purpose to bring it here 3 years later as an incredibly poor game. And I feel sorry for anyone who is a fan of the franchise. This is the only game I know of based on Baki the Grappler. From what I've read, there may be more, but it sounds as if they're exclusive to Japan, or if they did make it to the West, then perhaps they were localized in a way that kind of stripped all of the identity from it. That's happened sometimes. They'll rename and rebrand everything, and it's no longer to do with the original franchise it was based off of. This is just speculation though. There's not a huge amount of info on Baki the Grappler games in general. Wikipedia only mentions this one, but does mention that others exist. And when it comes to this one, there's hardly any information on it anyway. Even on the official Baki the Grappler wiki, it's quite limited and only a few paragraphs worth of info. I can't really recommend this to anyone, I don't think you're going to enjoy it if you are a fan of Baki the Grappler, because it's bad, and you're not going to like it if you're not a fan or never heard of it, because it's bad. There are just so many better fighting games out there on the PlayStation 2, on the PlayStation 1, on the 16-bit consoles. The fighting games generally are much better quality than this, so you don't have to worry about ever importing this, getting this over from the UK, or getting a Japanese copy. This is a collector's only kind of deal, and it's dirt cheap anyway, so whatever. Sadly, this is another one that goes back on the shelf, likely to be never played again. The positive side to this game was, in order to make this video, I didn't exactly have to play it for long and record a lot of footage to get the full experience. It didn't have much to offer anyway, so at least I don't feel like I've wasted much time with this. Anyway, that's another game down, thousands more to go. See you all next time.